As you know, we're going through the people of the Old Testament. And we looked at Abraham, we looked at Jacob, we looked at Joseph. And we saw their mistakes, their shortcomings, also their victories and triumphs. We're going through these people to learn from them. What is it that they were falling short on? What was it that made them strong? What was it that pleased God? How were they used in an effective way in God's hand? What was the character attributes they displayed to be used by God? Today we're going to start looking at the life of Moses. But since we cannot compress it into one message, it's going to be a series. And we're titling this message, Overcoming Your Past. A Christian is not defined by their past. Your past mistakes, the things that you've done that were wrong, they don't have to follow you for the rest of your life. We're going to look at the life of Moses. So for that, turn to Exodus. Exodus begins by recounting that there were 72 people that went into Egypt. And these 72 people ended up becoming a great nation. Now what happened was that Pharaoh that knew Joseph had died. A new Pharaoh came in, a new dynasty, a different family. And they didn't know nor care about who Joseph was and what he did to save the country or who his people were. All they saw was, hey, there is nearly 2 million people here. And if these guys, if there's a war, and if these guys choose to side with our enemies, this will be devastating for us. So what are we going to do? Well, they said, let's make them into slaves. And in order to stop them from growing more, as today's reading was, they told the midwives, if it's a boy, kill him. How gruesome, how evil, but after a child is born, how could anybody bring themselves to do it? How they would do it? I don't even want to think about it. But this is what they were instructed. But these women, they said, no, we're not going to do this. So they let the kids live. So Pharaoh hears this, says, you're not doing this. So he says, anybody who sees a boy, who's a Hebrew boy, who's born, you have to throw them into the Nile River. So let them drown to death. This was their way of crowd control, keeping they wanted to keep the girls because they could be servants and all that stuff. But boys, they could cause trouble, they could fight, they could, take arms and etc. So under these circumstances, there is a family, a Levite family, man and a woman, they get married, they have a baby boy. The mom hides the baby for 3 months, but she can no longer hide the baby. So I'm sure with much tears and emotion, she didn't throw the baby into the water, but she made a little ark with straw and pitch and placed the baby in there. And she entrusted the baby to the hands of God and just let the ark go. And as the ark was traveling, this baby's sister, who was older, obviously, was following to see where the ark was going to go. As the Lord would have it, the ark ended up going towards the palace of the Pharaoh. And as the Lord would have it again, at that perfect moment, Pharaoh's daughter was in the Nile River taking a bath. They don't believe in God. They thought the Nile River was a god. So when she sees this baby, she falls in love with him. She can't just let him go or kill him. She says, this baby boy is a gift from the Nile god to me. So she takes him, and his sister comes up to her, says, you know, we can give this baby to one of the Hebrew women to nurse him. Because this is not her baby, she's not nursing. And this sounded right to her. As the Lord would have it again, the sister of this baby took the baby back to her mom. She nursed him. We don't know to what age, but probably at least the school age. So she brought him up in her culture, and he knew who he was. I'm sure it was difficult to let him go at that point, but at a certain point, he became the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So he became the grandson, one of the grandsons of the Pharaoh. So with that came all the education and the societal influence. And, he was being brought up by the best of the schools. He was being brought up as a soldier, as a scholar, as a refined gentleman of the day, royalty, right? And then, but we see, as the story is going, we see that he hasn't lost his identity, because he sees a Hebrew slave being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he intervenes. He wants to be God's instrument. He wants to fix the problem. He sees a problem. He sees the injustice of this slavery, what's being done to his people, and he wants to do something about it. But he goes about it the wrong way. God is going to use him ultimately one day, but God didn't call him at this point. He didn't call him to do it this way. But regardless, taking the control of the situation, he says, I'm going to fix this problem, so he kills the Egyptian. And then, hoping that nobody saw him, he buries him in the sand. And the very next day, he sees two Hebrews fighting each other. He says, what are you guys doing? You guys are brothers. Why are you mistreating one another this way? Why are you fighting? And the guy that was in the wrong says to him, hey, who made you a judge and a ruler over? Who do you think you are, telling us what to do? You're going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday? So Moses gets scared. He says, oh my goodness, everybody knows. What am I going to do? And this was punishable by death. And by this time, Pharaoh heard, he wanted to kill him. So he had to get out of there. So he goes to this place, backside of the desert, called Midian. So he goes to the local place where you meet everybody, which is the water. He sees a bunch of ladies taking out water to give to their flocks, but he sees these shepherds giving them a hard time. They're chasing them away and taking their water and stuff. So he defends the ladies and helps them draw out more water. And these 7 ladies go back to their dad. They're all the daughters of the same guy. And the father says, how come you guys are home early today? And they say, there was this Egyptian who helped us and chased away all the shepherds, and he helped us get water. He says, where is he? He says, go invite him. And so they eat together. And long story short, they invite him to stay there to the extent that he marries one of the daughters there. So Moses is here for 40 years. He's married, he's got kids, he's a shepherd. He's about 80 at this point. And the purpose for his life has not begun yet. Those of you who feel old, just saying. Life is just beginning. Let's skip to chapter 3 and see what's happening in the desert. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire within a bush. Moses saw through the bush. Bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange thing. Why does the bush not burn up? When the Lord saw that he had come over to look, God called to him, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So, I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them out to the land that is good and spacious and flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites have reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I'm sending you. Now, until he heard these words, he was in agreement with God. He said, yes, save us, save these people, because they're being oppressed. I tried doing it, but I couldn't. I messed it all up. So I'm here in hiding. But God says, I'm going to do this. So Moses is probably, yes, this is great. Go, God, do it. And then he says, now go. He says, whoa, I can't do this. Who, me? I tried this once, Lord. Didn't work out too good. Look where I've been for 40 years. But do you see the transition of Moses? 40 years ago, he thinks he's got life figured out. Everything is under control. I'm going to save these people this way. If I see wrong, I'm going to fix it. Full of himself and prideful even. Fast forward 40 years, a different person. Humble. Not trusting himself at all. You see, until we become humble, one lesson we learn at this point. Our title is Lessons from the Life of Moses. Until we become humble, we are not usable by God. Very important lesson for all of us, young and old. Until we become humble, God will not use us in an effective way. And Moses, incidentally, is later recounted as the most humble man that ever lived. He didn't start out humble, but he became humble. He chose to become humble. So he comes up with all these excuses. Time is going fast. He says, I can't speak. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not loud enough. I can't speak fast enough. I cannot go to the Pharaoh. I cannot stand in front of him. And all these things. Send somebody else. Don't send me. I can't do this, he says. And he comes up with more excuses. He says, if I go there, who am I going to say that they sent me? What if they don't believe me? How are they going to follow me? Who am I? Why should they believe me? All these things. He's just telling God why he's not the man. And God insists that he is the person that he's going to use. Chapter 4 starts with, Moses answered, what if they don't believe me and listen to me and say, Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is in your hand? A staff, he replied. And the Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out, took the snake by the tail, turned back into a staff. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you. Now, this section I read has one of the lessons we want to notice today. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You just heard me read it. I am going to read another passage from 2 Kings and see if you can identify what the lesson is. Remember what we read. Okay. And let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 4. Now this is from the life of Elisha. Not Elijah, Elisha, his apprentice. 2 Kings chapter 4. Wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha. Now Elisha is a prophet of God. He's gone to this certain city, and this woman shows up and crying. Your servant, my husband, is dead. So obviously, he knew who her husband was, and her husband was also a prophet. And you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 sons as his slaves. What's happening here? This prophet dies, but obviously he had debt. Another lesson unrelated to our message today, but do not go in debt. Don't be in credit card debt. Don't be in mortgages that you cannot quickly and easily finish. If you have to borrow a ton of money to achieve something, do not do it. It's not God's way. One of the adverse effects of it is you might adversely affect your family. This guy died in debt. Now, this woman who's left alone, think about that day's society. This creditor, bank of the day, let's call it, is coming. She has no money. She doesn't have anything to give. So she's going to lose the only 2 things that she has, her 2 sons. They're going to take from him, either use them as slaves for the rest of their lives or sell them into slavery. So, if we go into debt, this is yet another example from the Bible. It will not adversely affect only you, but it will adversely affect your family as well. So do not go into that. Parentheses closed. Let's continue. So she's afraid. Because if these guys take the 2 sons, they're gone. And she's also left alone. At that time, there is no social safety net. So she's either going to be a beggar or she's going to be a prostitute. There is no other option for her. It's an awful existence. So she's desperate. This is the scene. Elijah is there listening to this. Elijah replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me what you have in your house." And your servant has nothing there at all. So they're really poor. They have nothing. She said, "Except a small jar of olive oil." A little bit of olive oil. Elisha said, "Go around and ask your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few, but make sure you get a lot of them." He says, "And then take your sons, go into the house, shut the door, and then continue filling all those jars." And as the Lord would have it, that little jar filled up all these jars. And then, after the jars were all filled, they went to Elijah. They said, "Now what? What should we do?" He said, "Now go sell all this olive oil, pay your debt, and live on whatever is left after that." So it must have been a lot of olive oil, right? Another small parenthesis here. You see, when God provides, He does it exceedingly abundantly. He didn't only come up with what they owed. He came up with more so they could live on it for the rest of their lives. Now, this is the second story. I want you to now tell me, what do they have in common? This is tough, I know. Abundance, yes, it's one of them. You know, the thing they have in common, does anyone even want to take a guess before I tell you? Is the Lord, when He was speaking to Moses, said, Moses answered, "What if they don't believe me, they don't listen to me?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." Fast forward to Elijah. Elijah replied to him, "How can I help you? Tell me what you have in your house." See the parallel? See, God is, in both cases, God is about to make great miracles. Right? This is the lesson. Oftentimes, we think God or we need all these elaborate things for God to work through us. If we were to ask Moses, he wouldn't have taken the staff. He would pray for this gold, diamond, and ruby entrusted staff that was brought down by an angel that had all these powers. But God said, "No, what is that in your hand?" Just a wooden staff. In this lady's case, chest full of gold didn't show up. What do you have in your house? A little bit of olive oil. Okay, I can work with that. This is the lesson. For us to be effective, we don't need these elaborate things that are magical and powerful. We don't need that specific house and that kind of a car to be happy and that kind of a... For us to be effective, God only wants us to give Him what we have. Remember the little boy when Jesus fed the 5,000? He has 5 loaves and 2 fish. Same question Jesus asked His disciples. What do you have? On all these 3 things, for a great miracle to happen, they didn't need all these grandiose things. For us to be used by the Lord, all we have to do is humbly surrender to Him and offer what we have. And look what God does with that. See, we spend our life going after these dreams and achieving, trying to do this and that. It could be our financial life. It could be our relational happiness. It could be our ministerial endeavors. If we had this kind of a church, then we would get a lot of people to be saved and follow the Lord and grow in their maturity. Or if we had this kind of a car, I would be happy. If I was to marry this kind of a person, oh, this would be great. I would be happy. Just offer what you have. Lord, here's what I have. I want to be used by you. My house, my car, my abilities, my talents. Let's stop here because this is going to be a series. And Moses' life is about to get worse before it gets better. So let's look at it next week. God bless you.